Hey, you guys, welcome back inside the Women in the Arena podcast. I'm here with Jen Herrera. She is a former news anchor in the South Florida area and now current owner of BU Interviews. So thank you for being here, Jen. I'm excited to talk to you today.
Paige, thank you for having me. I get excited when you say owner of BU Interviews. It's like the first day of school or something.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's just jump right into that then, because this is your newest venture. So, what inspired you to start BU Interviews?
Well, I have teenage daughters at home, so I'm around teenagers a whole lot. And in recent years, I've just noticed, and I don't want to sound like I'm talking badly about any teenagers. It's just kind of the way it is. With some teens, it's like pulling teeth to try to have conversation with them. I don't know if it's being on their phone so much. Maybe I was like that at that age. I don't know. But I started thinking about my strengths after working in television and interviewing people for so many years and how I could help these kids with what I was seeing. And being, again, an interviewer for so many years, I'm like, you know what? These kids are going to need help very soon when it comes to doing interviews. College interviews are a big thing, and just interviews in general, whether it's a job down the street or a police cadet or a fire cadet. I wanted to help them, and I really saw the need for it.
Yeah, I can't imagine, especially with the rise of technology after COVID and how people are getting more, I guess, creative when it comes to, okay, we're not just looking at a piece of paper or a resume anymore. We want to get to know the real person. So, where did you start to see the need for this? Was it in talking to your girls? Was it in noticing this in other areas? Like, where did you identify that there was this big gap in the market?
So I'm also an adjunct professor at a high school down here in South Florida. So I'm around a lot of kids all the time. And, Chat GPT, AI technology, it's all on the rise. And we've talked about it. It is wonderful in so many ways. I do think it hurts in other ways, especially when it comes to young people. I'd hear my kids talk about it. I'd hear their friends talk about it. I'd hear my students talk about it. Oh, just Chat GPT it. Or I wrote this through Chat GPT. Well, you didn't really write it if it was through Chat GPT, but okay. And then because I knew about the college interviews, I was exposed to the college interviews. I'm like, okay, what are these kids doing if they've Chat GPT'd their way through the entire college application or job application process? And then they're required to do a face-to-face interview. So you have a dependency already on technology, right? Looking at your iPad, looking on your phone, it is what it is. Then you've relied on Chat GPT to make yourself sound all sorts of ways in your application process. What happens when you go face to face? And so it's kind of like all of those things combined for me made it a no-brainer. And fortunately, from the feedback I've gotten, parents seem to be on board with this as well.
No kidding. I think it's brilliant. Obviously, we work together and I just love the idea. And I have to know though, when you start working with kids, what is it, or teens, excuse me, like what is it that is so scary? Is it the camera? Is it freezing in front of the camera? What is it that brings out fear so much in people? Because I actually see it in the market too. When I work with entrepreneurs and I'm explaining about being on reels or showing your face for your brand, there's a lot of fear behind that. So what do you see?
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that. It's not just teens. Adults struggle with this kind of thing as well when it comes to face-to-face interactions, especially in an interview setting, which is not necessarily the most comfortable. It's not like a one size fits all. All of these kids are different. People by nature, some people are very shy. And I'm very open when I say I can't fix shyness. I can't take away shyness. But what I can do is give you certain skills to apply going into an uncomfortable situation like an interview that can help with the shyness. Some kids, they really think they have their you-know-what together, and they do to a certain extent. But then when you push them on certain questions, they're like, oh, wait. The thing with interviews, college interviews, all interviews, you don't know what questions are going to come at you. So my goal is to find their story. Find their highlight reel is what I like to say. It's a television term, but I use it for this. Let's find your story. Let's find your highlight reel. Let's pick 3 or 4 things. So no matter what your insecurity is or your uncomfortable reason is during an interview, we're going to find these 3 or 4 things, and they're kind of going to serve as your crutches. So no matter how a question is asked, because the same question can be asked a lot of different ways, but no matter how a question is asked, you're going to be able to work those answers into your highlight reel, into your story to to make you stand out during your interview.
This totally makes me think of like PR campaigns when somebody of, high prominence is going to answer a question and we really want the message to be geared one way. That's what it makes me think of.
It's interesting. You have to learn that young, right? When you're being interviewed, it's really in your power what you want to share and what you want to put out there. So why not be completely prepared with like your bullet points in your mind of what you want to share? I think even at a young age, it's important to learn that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what are some of the most common mistakes you've found with teens as far as being in front of the camera or being in the interview itself? If somebody's listening who has teens, or if even teens are listening, what are those common mistakes that you see or that we should look out for if we're a parent listening who has a teen?
I think the biggest red flag that I have seen is I've had a couple of students, not a lot, but I have had a couple of students who log into the interview because most of them are done virtually and their camera's off. And I'll say, hey, so-and-so, I need you to turn your camera on. And they're like, oh, well, I was going to turn my camera on for my real interview, but I didn't think I needed to turn my camera on for a practice interview. So that's the big one. You want to make sure you have your camera on. It may seem like a no-brainer. And again, I'm not mocking anybody, but what happens is during COVID and kids were at school and they were doing at-school learning, they got away in a lot of cases with leaving their cameras off. So they think it's okay going into these professional, if you will, environments, leaving their cameras off. In an interview, you do not leave your camera off. And under no circumstances should you do that. Showing up on time, Paige, is a huge one. I know with my kids at home, if you're not early, you're late. Like that's our motto at home. Showing up on time is huge. When students show up late, right off the bat, right? It just puts a bad taste in your mouth. And eye contact, which seems odd to say, especially on virtual setting, but like, I'll give you an example. This is what I teach in my complete video series. When I'm speaking with you, I look at the camera lens on my laptop. Most people look at the video box. Well, if you're looking at the video box, you're not simulating eye contact. Looking at the camera simulates eye contact. So those are three really easy things that take zero skill that we go over and that I work with the kids with. And, we laugh about it, we talk about it. And at first they're kind of like hesitant to look at the camera and they're like, oh, this is weird. But then by the end of an hour working with them, they're much more comfortable. And so the goal is if they're much more comfortable with me, then they'll be much more comfortable in their actual interview. But yeah, those three things are pretty basic ones.
I mean, they're basic, but honestly, as you're saying that, I'm like, okay, let me make sure that I'm looking at the camera because I'm totally not. I'm always in my Zoom calls or when I'm working with clients, like I'm always looking at their face because I'm trying to read their expression when it comes to like the coaching piece. So now I'm like, should I look at the camera? I mean, what do you think?
No, okay. So that's a good point. I'm glad you said that because I do explain this. When someone else is speaking, of course, you want to look at the video box so that you can look. No one stares at somebody, right? Like in the eyes the entire time they're talking. That would just be weird. And I literally say that exact same thing to my students. So it's okay to look down every once in a while because knowing your audience is a big part of this. And that's from my TV background. And that's what I teach. And knowing your audience, if anyone's not familiar with that term, is paying attention to how the viewer, if you will, or the other person is reacting. Are they reciprocating the same emotion, the same passion, the same interest as you are when you're speaking? So yes, 100% look down at the video box every once in a while, but you also want to make sure you're looking at the camera as much as possible too.
Okay, definitely noted and about to practice it right now. So, okay, can you share with us a success story that you found where there was somebody who was really hesitant about it or really started from scratch and you were able to walk them through the process? Do you have a success story that you can share with us in that process?
Yeah, I mean, a couple jump out right away. I worked with a student who it was a struggle to get started. I would say we worked together for about an hour and it was kind of like pulling teeth, for lack of a better way of saying it. Eventually, after asking follow-up question, because they didn't think that they had anything to offer during their college interview, they said, I don't remember how it got brought up, but they said, oh, I'm not on social media. And I was like, what? You're a 17-year-old kid who's not on social media? Like that is a huge highlight for your highlight reel, if you will. That's something that's going to make you memorable in comparison to everyone else who may be applying to the school. And so once I pointed that out, they felt so much more comfortable. And from there, we were able to get, I don't remember if it was 3 or 4 additional stories to tell. Another student who I worked with, I would say their parent was more nervous and more reluctant than the student, which happens, right? As parents, sometimes we freak out more than our kids. And during the interview, he started off extremely nervous, rambling. It was almost kind of like, okay, how are we got to string a sentence together here. You know, we have to, and nerves take over. Listen, nerves take over. Most of us can talk in conversation, okay, but when we're nervous, it doesn't always happen. By the end of the interview, you know, he was smiling. I can see it in the body language. I found something that he was passionate about, that he wanted to talk about, not what he thought I wanted him to talk about, which is huge with kids because they try and give the answers right away that they think the person interviewing them wants to hear. And that's not what we want to do in these situations. We want them to be comfortable telling their story, like all those great things about them. So once he started talking, I mean, I could see it in his face. I could see it in his body language. And he was applying to a cadet program for the fire department and he got it. So that was a huge success story as well. There was one other, I mean, there's been a lot, but then there was one other student who I saw him right before he graduated and we were talking about what school he got into. And I said, "You did it." And he said, "We did it." And I was just kind of like goosebumps. I was just kind of like, it was very, very cool. He would have gotten in anyway because the college interview, because that's what he was doing, isn't really a make or break when it comes to getting into colleges. It can definitely set you apart in the application process, but it is not a make or break. But I thought it was very sweet that he said that.
Absolutely. And I love that in your story, you're kind of explaining about the BU piece of the title of your business, because that's what you're encouraging teens to do, is just be themselves and help to draw out their highlight reel, which I think is so valuable. So you mentioned nerves and how everybody's a little bit nervous. And even when I'm in front of the camera, sometimes I get nervous, honestly, especially interviewing you, because I'm like, this is an interview expert and now I'm interviewing her. So I'm going to have to get a takeaway at the end.
You're doing amazingly. You're doing great.
Now that I'm looking at the camera. So my question is, you transitioned from being a news anchor for so long and being in this specific arena. So even with these gifts of interviewing that you have and you've practiced and you've put in the reps over time, you've developed a confidence there. But transitioning into an entrepreneurship role where you're selling your services, that comes with some fear. So share a little bit about that journey and just kind of the process that's led you here and in kind of the hurdles along the way, if you will.
As you know, I worked in television for more than 20 years, and it was a little over a year ago that I decided I wasn't going to continue to do that, mainly because of work-life balance. I think some of us get to a point in life where we're like, okay, how much time, how do we want to split our time? How do we want to divide our time? For me personally, and it's not right, it's not wrong. For me personally, I wanted to be able to do more with my time at home. With that said, I've worked my entire life and I love television. I love live TV. I love news. I love journalism. I'll admit, with an election right around the corner, I get the itch sometimes because it's just like, oh, there's so many stories to tell. So I knew I had to stay busy because that's just how I am. And I also knew that I didn't want to work for anybody, Paige. I knew that I wanted to be my own boss. It is what it is. And so I was looking at what I was doing and dealing with my teens, what I was seeing for those couple of hours that I'm at the school every single morning, what I know that I'm good at. And so that's how I kind of decided, as we spoke about earlier, that I wanted to do something with interviewing teens. Now, having this idea and actually implementing it is very different. A little over a year ago, I went on, GoDaddy, and did BU Interviews Inc. I opened an Instagram, then I didn't do anything for a while, like for almost a year, maybe over a year. And because I knew I had this idea, I knew I wanted to do it. Things would hit me in the face every day. Like somebody was, I know who, was giving me a sign, like, this is what you need to do. This is what you need to do. And so finally I got an email from you that just said beta in it. And I was on my couch and I opened it up and it was just like, okay, all of these things are pointing in one direction. You have to do something with this. And that's when I signed up for Elevate to Entrepreneurship. And I wanted to throw up several times during that entire 6 weeks we spent together. You were fantastic. It's really overwhelming. And I think it's especially hard, Paige, for women or people in general, men too, I imagine, who have had success starting something new that you're not good at yet. So you kind of go from here to rock to the bottom and like climbing your way up. That's not an easy thing to do. And there's been moments where I'm just like, what am I doing? Like, I could just go do this. I'm really good at this. I know how to do this, but no, I don't want to do that because I don't want that lifestyle. And no, I don't want a boss. I want to be my own boss. So yeah, so it's definitely been a process. It's, you're only accountable to yourself in the entrepreneurship process, which is interesting because I consider myself a very accountable person. I'm a very disciplined person. I'm a very scheduled person, but it's on like overdrive right now. Right?
Yes, yes, 100%, 100%. I feel that at a soul level. So who has it required you to be stepping into this new role? Like who has it required you to become?
I have dealt with a feeling of failure more in the past few weeks than I have felt in a very long time. And luckily, I'm okay with it. I think age kind of has a lot to do with that too. But it's still kind of like, oh, this doesn't feel very good. But I know that I want it more than I fear it. So even though I'm having these yucky feelings like this stinks, like what am I doing? I thought that it would be here by now. Maybe not here, but I thought it would be here by now. Yeah, I think dealing with, I know that I'm not a failure, but you have moments of feeling like, why am I not succeeding at a level I'm used to succeeding at? There's definitely that going on.
Yeah, it's something that I had to learn too from like high performing women. I remember I've shared this on my podcast before, and maybe I've told you, but I remember talking to my former business coach, and she called me a perfectionist. And as like somebody that I considered the opposite of perfectionist, because I typically take action and then figure it out, like very much an action taker and then figure things out, which isn't. I'm not saying that's good, bad, or indifferent. We all have our tendencies, but she called me a perfectionist, and I was like, "What are you talking about?" And she's like, "Well, you're just expecting to be good right away." And I was like, "Well, why wouldn't I expect that?" And I mean, you have an athletic background, I have an athletic background, so maybe it has something to do with that. You're used to reaping the rewards of your performance and your input. And in this, it takes a lot of time for you to see that return. But I've also heard, and I think you'll find this interesting, I've also heard other people speak in the online space and in the business world about almost being thankful that they don't know the journey before they take a leap. Like it's almost really helpful to be a little bit naive and have this big vision and this big dream before you actually look back and look at all the steps. And so I don't know if you could relate to that. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts. But I know for me, if I would have looked back 5 years ago and looked at what it looked like over the past 2 years to be full-time entrepreneurship, I don't know if at that time I would have thought that I could do it. It's easier to look back in hindsight, but if you don't know what's coming and you're just taking one step at a time and putting one step in front of the other, I almost feel like there's a little bit of an advantage there versus knowing everything you're going to have to battle. I mean, what do you think about that in your experience so far?
No, I would completely agree with that. Like I thought, very naive. I thought I was going to get my whole, video series set up and make a few posts, and that was going to be it. And that's not it. It is an everyday grind. So yes, I would 100% agree with you. But with that said, at the same time, I wish I had done it a year ago. Does that make sense? Like I wish I had started it even more than that, like time, years ago. I wish I would have started it. But I didn't have teenagers at that time. So I wouldn't have been exposed to my inspiration, if you will. But yeah, no, it's entrepreneurship, it's the real deal. And it's fascinating because my husband and I have a business. We've had a business for 10 plus years. I will say he has been the lead on that business just because I had my career. I know that you talk about partnership a lot and how important that is finding a partner who supports you. And so I've supported him. I've had a role in our business as well, not the lead that he has, but I'm so much more impressed with my husband than I've ever been in 20 plus years together, because I'm like, damn, I mean, he did it. He did it. And he's doing it. And it's all entrepreneurs. I give so much more credit now, just a few weeks in. You think, right? You think, oh, it's a business owner. Other people have no idea until they're actually in it themselves.
Yeah. And I think to your point, a lot of it is because so much of the work is done behind the scenes, right? Like so much of the work is done behind the scenes. It's sitting with your fear and deciding, okay, I want this, like you said earlier, I want this more than I feel this fear. And there was a time, I don't know if I shared this with you, probably like 6 months ago or so, where I started interviewing for an online job. And I was like, okay, I can do both. As you know, I'm getting married in a month. And so I was like, that would be really nice to have two incomes that I used to have. So one could go towards the wedding. And I got all the way through this process where I knew that they were going to hire me, and I could not shake this like tightness in my chest when it came to like the idea of working for somebody again. And I was like, oh my gosh, I know this could be great, but also I cannot imagine. And so, how have you dealt with working through that fear? Because like I had to actually like face the other option before I was like, nope, revitalized. And things started to like really pick up again. And it's been like an ebb and flow typically over the past 2 years. So yeah, what's been grounding you or what keeps you moving forward?
Yeah. Okay. Fortunately, I do some freelance work. So that's nice because I still get to like dip my toe in television commercials, whatever, if you will. But there have been a couple of nibbles. And when you get the email or you get the phone call, and then for me, then I sit there and think about everything that goes with it. I'm like, no. I just think my life, my family, my time is so much more valuable to me than it's ever been. And I get it because it's scary. It's like, oh, well, I could be doing this. I could be funding this. I could, be able to go here and buy this. And I'm not going to say I'm completely confident in my business right now. I'm completely confident in what it can be. Again, I would be lying because I have those moments of like, oh, but I'm completely confident in what it can be, which is why it's just kind of like there's no other option but straight ahead. It's making that decision, Paige, right? It's making that decision that no, I'm not going to get deterred. I'm not going to, they're dangling the carrot over here, but there's such a need for it. First of all, like there is such a need for it. When I work with these teens and, I hang up or, get off the virtual call, I can't even explain it. It's just like, oh my gosh, like, I'm so glad they had that conversation. I hope they feel so glad that they had that conversation. It's just a huge reminder of how much it really is needed. So there's that. And then there's the beauty, and I'm sure you experience this every day with what you do. Like it's your own, like you have something of your own, and that's huge.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have kids yet, but it does feel like your baby. I was working with Arkansas softball, and I remember when the coaches that had kids would spend their off time with their kids, I would literally say I was just going to take care of my baby too, which was my business at the time. And it really does mean that much to you. And speaking of your kids, though, what do you want your daughters to see out of your building your business? What do you want? What do you hope they see from your experience?
So it's interesting because, when talking, I'll be like, I have to go do an interview. I'm doing an interview. They've heard that expression their entire lives, right? So it's not until recently where they're like, what are you doing? Or, I'll be sitting working. Can we do this? Can we do this? No, I'm working. What are you doing? So that's been interesting and trying to explain that. Fortunately, they've seen my husband and I build a business for over a decade. So they've kind of seen the nuts and bolts of how a business works. I hope that they see that you don't have to pick one career and then that's it. At least when it comes to my experience, like just because you say you want to be this thing and you are this thing for so many years, that doesn't mean that you can't change your mind or can't do something else to better your life. And, I'm for my girls, especially raising young women, I do tell them this. I always tell them, like, if they want to stay home and raise their family, there's nothing wrong with that. Whatever they do, whether it's their own business, whether it's a career, whether it's being a mom, whether it's being a wife, but not a mom, whatever they do, they just have to give 100% and it has to fulfill them. That's just been something that I've told them for years, but I do like that they see me working and that they've seen me working on different stages and they see me cook and they see me clean and they see me do all of that stuff too, because I think that's important for me. I think that's important for them to see.
Yeah, they get two examples of entrepreneurship in two different businesses. What do you feel like watching your husband's business and working in that business has taught you when it comes to yours, as you've been able to compare the two and kind of appreciate what he's done so far?
Yeah, no, I knew that I didn't want to do not a service industry. So our business is landscape design. So plants die, right? Things are perishable. I knew I didn't want to do that. We have amazing employees. We have an incredible team. We are blessed that wonderful people work for us. With that said, when you have a certain amount of employees, that's a lot of work. So I knew I wanted to do something with a smaller group of employees. I like online. Our business is a local business to South Florida. I like the opportunity to not only work with young people, teens in South Florida, but to be able to work with teens anywhere. Like for me, that's just like, how cool is this? Just, the reach is just so much farther. So those were a few things that I knew I wanted to do differently than what we've done with our landscape business.
So if somebody's looking at your Instagram, because you have an awesome following, you make reels consistently, you seem unapologetic and just not afraid to show up and be consistent. What do you think about? Because if somebody else is watching thinking like, I don't know if I have that energy, or I don't know if I can do what Jen does, like what would be your advice to that person who wants to be an entrepreneur or wants to sell online?
Yeah, I would tell them that I totally get it. It might sound crazy, but when social media first started getting big, I was super reluctant to share, to post, to do anything. I mean, this is Facebook. This was like before Instagram. I just felt very like private about certain things. Even as a news anchor, it's changed a lot. But when I was the news anchor doing news, I always thought that we were held to a higher standard. So I was reluctant to share certain things. The time is a little bit different now. It's storytelling. So if you want to share your story, then you have to use social media to do so. Sometimes some people look at it as a necessary evil. I would advise not to share based on the latest trends or not to share based on what you're seeing someone else doing, because then you're not going to be comfortable. To me, it's like really obvious. But if you're sharing something that like you're super excited about, like Paige, all your stuff, I love all your stuff. Like you can tell you're super excited to share all your stuff. Like that's how I feel when I make a reel. Like I'm usually talking about cooking, my kids, or BU interviews, because those are the things I'm super passionate about. So I would say just make your first reel. Like just make your first reel, make it funny or not funny, whatever, make it whatever story you want to tell, whatever side of you want your followers or potential clients to see. That would be my advice.
I think it's great advice. And I think the thing that you say that is very unique that I hadn't picked up on until this interview, honestly, is just the story piece. Is like, if you just ask somebody, when I teach, obviously, this, I tell you, okay, so pick your pillars of your business and let's share those. And one of those pillars can absolutely be behind the scenes or what you enjoy doing, right? But I love the way that you say, okay, you can share pieces of your story. It's similar to the interviews. You're talking about this with the teams that you work with, but you can also talk about it with entrepreneurs. It's like, okay, I was at a coffee shop this morning and it's called Word Coffee. And on the wall, it said, talk about the things you like. That was all it said. And I thought to myself, well, if somebody's looking at my Instagram and I'm talking about the things I like, they're going to see me talking about work, 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 work. They're going to see me talking about, like leadership. They're going to see me talking about my boxer dog Catch who's snoring over here and Peyton and CrossFit. So I like that because like, that's true. Like you're just telling your story. You're telling either your story of being an entrepreneur, the story of how you can solve somebody's problem, or you're telling a little bit of the behind the scenes. And I really love that you share it that way.
Yeah, it paints a picture. And that's what I tell my students. Your storytelling literally paints a picture. Like just now, you said your dog's name is Catch. And I know that you're a softball player. So if I was interviewing you, I would ask you if your dog is named Catch because you played softball. So it's giving those little nuggets and then getting more details and then crafting your whole story. And, what I share with my students is that's what makes you memorable. That's what makes you stand out. Students and any job candidate, we all look very similar on paper or in an online application. But once you verbalize and what face to face, once you share your story, you become real. You become something else. And so I mean, I've been telling stories my whole life. Like that's reporting, right? When you're on a scene, you look around, you look at the elements, and then you tell your story. The same exact things apply when it comes to an interview.
Okay, but this is gold. I have to dig into this even further. Like what you're saying is gold because when somebody asks you your gifts, like especially if I go in and do an Enneagram workshop and I'm talking to people about their gifts and the things that they do really well, that's really uncomfortable for a lot of people, or they can't identify them because it's kind of like a fish in water. You've always been in water. You've always been doing things the same way. And it's other people that identify the gifts. So like what you do is so vital because you're literally able to have a conversation with these teams and pull out those gifts and say like, here's what you do really well. This is how you stand out amongst a lot of other people that I work with, and use these things to your advantage. And I don't think you get that from a textbook or from a class. Like you get that from a one-on-one conversation, which I remember you and I were talking about, like, how is it a group setting or is it one-on-one? And you're spot on. I think that has to be a one-on-one conversation.
It has to be one-on-one because it can get very deep. I've worked with students and I mean, the conversations, they've gotten serious. And I always say this with every student I work with. And I think it's so important. And I mean it when I say it. I always say, if I ask you a follow-up question to something you said and you're not comfortable, just say, hey, I'd rather not talk about that. Move on. My feelings won't be hurt. So there's that. Like, We don't need to talk about that, because you should never be talking about something you're uncomfortable with in an interview, under no type of interview. Some of the kids will, be like, I don't know where to start. So I always say, okay, who do you live with at home? And, is it mom? Is it dad? Is it just mom? How many siblings do you have? Okay. Where did you grow up? Okay, what was your favorite thing to do with your sibling? Oh, we used to play with a train set. Oh, you like trains? Oh, I love trains. When did you get your first train set? I got my first train set when I was 4. What was it for? Oh, it was for my 4th birthday. What did you do with that train set? Oh, I remember taking it and running it up and down the couch, and my mom would yell at me because I would leave marks on the couch. You keep asking questions, then you find out the kid wants to go into engineering. So instead of just saying, I want to be an engineer in your interview, you say, I still remember when I was 4 years old and I got a train set and I used to run it up and down my mom's couch, and she would get so mad at me and I would play with my little brother. Ever since then, I knew I wanted to be an engineer and build things. So it's just digging and asking those questions and then forming their story. And then they have something to say, which that's power, right? When you go into an interview, knowing what you want to say, knowing what you want to share, that's huge. And for a kid, like for a teen, to have that confidence to go in, even if they're nervous, knowing what they want to say is huge.
Yeah, that feels so powerful. I feel powerful, like just even thinking about them being able to share that. So, okay, so with BU interviews, you are in the beginning stages. It probably doesn't feel like that. It probably feels like you've been in a grind, but where do you see this going? Like what is the big picture look like for you if you allow yourself to go there?
Yeah, I mean, I honestly, at this point, I want to help as many teens as I can. And it truly did start with, and a huge part of it is the college interview, right? Getting them ready for their college interview. But it's kind of evolved, and speaking with parents and speaking to some of these kids, I want to help all of them. So helping as many teens as possible. I have the complete video series, which is just over an hour. It's like 70 minutes of content, and it's broken down in like 7-minute, 8-minute, 10-minute videos. And it takes you from the beginning to the end, meaning why I'm doing B interviews, why your teen should do B interviews. I even acknowledge the moms who may be sitting next to their teens in the first video and remind them that maybe you should let your teen do this on their own after the first video. But as a mom of teens, I totally get it. We talk about the fun stuff, what to wear, what to do with your hair. I know I touch my hair a lot. So if you're like me and you get nervous and you touch your hair, maybe you pull it back during an interview, where to look, the kind of stuff that we talked about. It talks about finding your story. If it's not a one-on-one and it's the complete video series, which I think is the fastest and most effective way to reach the most teens, how do you dig and find those details for your story? And that is all in the complete video series. It's also, I have some of the most common interview questions in there. Tell me about yourself is a huge one. So that's kind of telling your story. But then there's other questions that are super common, like what's your favorite book? Okay, we're not just going to say our favorite book. We're going to know the title. We're going to know the author, and we're going to be able to give a brief little synopsis of why it's your favorite book. So things like that, but it really is a one-stop shop. I purposely didn't want to make it too long because, again, I have teenagers. I know teenagers. And the other thing I really like about the complete video series is teens have access to it. You get it and you have access to it. So maybe they have an interview with one school and then they want to brush up before an interview with another school. They have the ability to go back and do that.
This seriously sounds like gold. Like, as somebody who's even like very comfortable in front of the camera and just always been drawn to it, I would definitely have utilized this early on. So I think this is gold. Where can people find you and connect with you and also get the video series?
So on Instagram is where I do most things, and it's Mrs. Jen Herrera TB. That's on Instagram. And in my bio link is the link for the complete video series.
Amazing. Okay, so we're going to link that down here for all of you guys that are eager to jump in. You'll have a link so you can go find Jen, go find the complete video series, especially if you have teens or even if you have friends or family that you think that your teen can benefit from this. It sounds honestly valuable for anybody. So everybody go jump on that. And Jen, I have one final question that I ask everybody who's on the podcast. So what does it mean to you to be a woman in the arena?
I hope that I'm an example for somebody who's watching, whether it's a teen who's watching, whether it's a mom who's watching, whether it's a woman who feels like she was ready to try something new who's watching, whether it's a former athlete who's like, okay, I'm used to doing things all the time. I just hope I can be an example.
Amazing. Well, I can't thank you enough for your time. Thank you so much for being here. Everybody go get BU interviews, a complete video series, and we'll talk to you next time.
Thanks, Paige.